where I grew up was in north of Tehran, where there is a lot of mountains. And I used to go, yeah, on the first of spring we used to go to north of Iran, and then summer we used to go to, and I mean, one city every year. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, everything is changed. I've seen some images on the Google. It's totally changed, almost 100% changed. I feel like I'm a stranger there at the moment if I go there. So
Iran has been affected by the coronavirus pandemic since 2019, but with no harsh lockdowns in place, the numbers are still rising and the streets of Iran are still bustling. Meanwhile, at home in Sydney, my dad is calling his nephew in Tehran.
محسن جان حالا چطوره؟ چرا اینجوری سرفه میکنی؟
اما من دوباره کرونا گرفتم. من تاکسی دارم، با این تاکسی کار میکنم تو خیابون، مجبوری همش بریم سر کار. دولت به ما پول نمیده که. بعد به خاطر همین الان دوباره کرونا گرفتم، افتادم شدید تو خونه، خیلی هم بدجور.
This is my dad's nephew Mohsen, who's currently battling with the coronavirus for the third time.
کرونایی میخوام بریم سر کار که هر روز هم که میریم زیاد کار خبری نیست چه سالیه. دولت هم هیچ کمکی به ما نمیکنه. همینطوری موندیم با 2 تا بچه، نمیدونیم چیکار بکنیم. بسم الله. حالا من یه چرخ تو شهر میخوام بدارم ببینم کار چجوریه، ببینم مسافر هست نیست. اکثر روزا که کار زیاد به اون صورت خبری نیست، همش کسادیه. حالا من کلا تو سطح شهر دارم میچرخم از رو، هیچ خبری نیست. اکثرا یا تو خونه هاشونن، به خاطر کرونا بیرون نمیان. هرچی هم میریم تاکسیرانی اعلام میکنیم که ما بیکاریم، پول نداریم، کسی به ما کمکی نمیکنه، به ما رسیدگی نمیکنن کلا.
این جای عزیزم اینجا خوابیدن، اونا مدعی کسیمون از من گرفتن، نذاشتن واکسن بیان، جونم در میاد انتقامشو بگیرم.
Meanwhile, the people of Iran are taking to social media to protest the authorities and spread awareness with the hashtag #HelpIran. Many citizens are critical of the lack of vaccinations available.
اگه واکسن بود الان عزیزم زنده بود. تو جهنم بسوزی.
Iran is one of the most affected countries by the pandemic, with one of the highest COVID-19 mortality rates and its rate of spread being amongst the highest. Dr. Shanahan from the Lowy Institute believes Iran's political structure plays a role in the spread of the virus.
And Iran is an autocratic system, but of a different type of autocracy than you see in some other systems. But it's autocratic nevertheless, and what autocracies never like to do, or particularly the underlings in autocracies, is ever to be completely truthful about bad news. That's one of the problems in autocracies, and I think that's one of the things that we saw in Iran. The virus was in the country longer than was publicly acknowledged, and it was probably more widespread than was publicly acknowledged. So by the time that the government decided to take actions to address the pandemic, they were already behind the eight ball because news had not, correct data had not either filtered up or been given to the public. The nature of the threat was not publicly acknowledged, and so therefore it becomes very difficult to get the public to sign on to a series of measures if you're not completely truthful with them about the nature of the problem. And I think you see in countries like Australia, one of the reasons why when you had the public political announcements, you had the political leader, and next to them you had the health expert as well, so that politics and health has to go, in these kind of pandemics, they have to go hand in hand, and one can't override the other. But you don't really see that in autocratic systems, because you just have the political response, which is informed by the public health recommendations, but they're not considered to be equal in any way, shape, or form.
US sanctions have also played a role in restricting access to vaccines and medical equipment.
The United States withdrew from the nuclear deal and imposed its own unilateral sanctions. The problem with unilateral sanctions on Iran is that there is also a secondary sanction aspect to it, which means that if Europeans want to deal with Iran, then European companies will also be sanctioned by the US. As a result, a lot of financial transactions with Iran have been affected. So it's not just a question of Iran's ability to go and purchase medication from European markets. It's the fact that financial transactions for Iran to pay for the medication is seriously hampered and in many ways blocked. So this has meant that if Iran cannot purchase medication, there's going to be a scarcity of resources, and scarcity pushes up the price.
Under the hashtag Help Iran, many Iranians are posting photos and videos to show the lack of beds in Iranian hospitals.
تختا چطوره؟
جا نیست دیگه. اکسیژن گاهی کم میاد.
تخت نداریم. الان دیگه فشار اکسیژن داره میفته. ببین تمام مریضا دارن اکسیژن میگیرن. و الان ما با مشکل این هم یکی از مشکلات دیگه است که ما داریم.
مسجد دانشوری بردیم تحویل نگرفتن، چند روز ما رو اسیر کردن، میگفتن تخت خالی نداریم.
از اونجا هم آوردم اینجا با گریه منو بستری کردن، اونم توی اونجا.
تختخانه پیدا نمیشه.
نه.
Scarcity of resources. That is a major factor which has driven prices up, and it has affected many of people who cannot afford the medication, the services that they need. So it has in fact highlighted the social gap.
My dad's nephew Mohsen is feeling the effects of these social gaps in Iran and believes many others are too.
من که خودمو دارم میبینم بقیه هم مقایسه میکنم که من با 2 دختر با این درآمدی که دارم نمیتونم کرایه خونه‌مو بدم، زندگیمو بگذرونم. خیلی شرایط برام سخت شده خداییش. حتی من مقدار زیادی از وسایل‌های خونه‌ام مجبور شدم تو این 2 ساله بفروشم، مثلا برای کسایی که روز درآمد بودن عین من، مثلا روزانه مزدشون میگرفتن. خیلی ضرر خورد. وام به ما وامای خیلی جزئی دادن، با سود از همون برگشت میگیرن، یعنی کمکی به ما نکرد اون وام. حتی به اندازه شاید بگم 3 کیلو گوشت گوسفندی هم نبوده قیمتش که بخوام بگیم وامی به ما دادن. به هر حال گرونی هم خیلی شدید شده، یعنی ما نمیتونیم به خدا واقعا الان کسای دیگه هم عین من نکنم، فقط خودم نمیشه تو این کشور زندگی کرد، به سختی میشه زندگی کرد.
Yeah, I feel bad. Yeah, I really feel bad. You know, I wish I could do something for them, but I'm only one person, and there's not much I can do, you know, for them besides praying for them.
parts of Iran, while still affected by the virus, are going out and socializing. While he's worried about his family in Iran, in Sydney, my dad is having his own struggles with the COVID-19 lockdowns.
Yeah, it's very hard. Lockdown is really, really hard. You lose your social life. People, they like to live with each other. They like to see each other in the shopping centers, restaurants. Doesn't matter they know each other or not, and that makes it very hard.
21-year-old Kimia from Sydney has been living alone with her brother for over a year. Her parents, who went to visit relatives and do business in Iran in April 2019, have been stuck there ever since.
Initially, when New South Wales went into lockdown, and then obviously they just stopped the flights and the borders closed, it was basically a repeat of flights being cancelled, and then it was an increase in price. So a really plain economy flight that would have cost us $2,000 or $4,000 maximum was like $15,000-$20,000. The government wasn't really supporting any sort of considerations or anything like that.
For Kimia, it's been a struggle to communicate with her parents from Australia.
I try to speak to her as much, but I've got WhatsApp to speak to her too. And Iran has a lot of sanctions on what kind of apps they allow. One day you wake up, they've shut off Wi-Fi for the whole thing, so it's like I don't speak to my mum for a few days. And with the time difference, it's a little bit hard. 9 p.m. when I'm home from work and I'm about to sleep, it's hard to balance and try to upkeep communication, especially during lockdown as well. It's there's not much to speak about. Or she's busy and I'm busy. There's no Wi-Fi for her, she doesn't get my messages. That's definitely a factor, and with COVID, Iran's not obviously the safest place. Not knowing if my mom's being safe enough or other people around her are being safe enough, it's very concerning.
Kimia's father actually contracted COVID while in Iran.
Mid last year he got COVID, and it was actually really interesting seeing how they take care of that situation in Iran. So he was basically at home. They blocked off a certain area of the house for him with just clear plastic taped across the walls, and he was actually really, really sick, but thankfully he recovered. So he did go to hospital. They sent him home after a few days. He was given medication. I'm not entirely sure what the medication was. He had an IV drip at home, which was set up for him, and that was really it. No one checked up on him. It was just basically get better. My mum, she has a lot of medical issues, so her running out of medication or not being able to see the right doctors. In her case, it's if I've eaten or simple stuff like that.
Like my dad's relatives in Iran, Kimia's parents had their own struggles with getting the vaccine.
My mum was able to get her first dose of AstraZeneca, which was really hard to get actually. So in Iran, they're kind of black marketing those types of vaccinations. So it cost about 1.1 thousand AUD. With my dad, he had his first dose, which was a Chinese vaccine, and the second one an Iranian vaccine. So it's actually after trying to find Pfizer or Astra, but it's crazy. You don't really know what they're injecting you with. Even the AstraZeneca that we purchased for my mum, we can't be entirely sure that it was an AstraZeneca dose. It really opened my eyes in how privileged we are here. I wasn't really fussed about what vaccine I got until I realized how hard it is for them. And I think I've been very lucky, and I wish my parents had the same luck to be able to be like, all right, cool, I'm vaccinated, I know what I got, I know what was in it, it's safe, cool, let's move on.
Whilst she has had to take on a lot of excess responsibility, the hardest part for Kimya has been her parents missing her milestones.
Yeah, so that was really hard for my 21st. My mum threw me a surprise party with my family friends from Iran, so she planned that from there. Sorry. I graduate soon as well, so like not having them here is a bit hard as well. And certainly because like I don't really know when I'll see them. So when I said goodbye to my mum like over a year ago, I didn't really think I would be saying goodbye for that long.
Kimya is still hopeful when it comes to revisiting Iran.
I would love to go back, and I'm sure they would as well once they come back, obviously. Even though I was born here, it kind of feels like home. So I'm really close to my culture, and I just love it there. Like, I love it. I love the culture, the history, the food. I love walking down the street and like hearing people talk Farsi.
But for now, Kimya just wants to see her mum again.
I don't know what we will do first, but even if it's sitting on the couch and watching her Turkish shows, I'm down for that.
And as Sydney's lockdown restrictions ease, my dad is reunited with his family again. Something my relatives in Iran did not have to experience. Although he can't go to Iran right now, my dad is still finding ways in Sydney to stay in touch with his culture.
This area is like little Iran. I always see the friends here in the car park. All that shop. Every one of them is Persian shops.
Inside this store, the bakers have come straight from Tehran. It's one of the only places in Sydney that makes bread the traditional Persian way. Many of the Iranian shop owners are optimistic about their return to Iran, despite the current coronavirus situation.
امیدواریم که این کرونا ریشه کن بشه.
از اینجا شروع کردیم. Different variety of Persian tea and sweets that they mix it with the tea.
Some other shop owners' relatives have had different experiences in Iran.
My mum, she got it after she got the vaccine. So it was very bad. Like a few days after she got the vaccine, she got the COVID. And she was really sick for about 2 weeks, and now she's recovering. I think it was a vaccine that was made in China, so it's not Pfizer or the AstraZeneca.
First days of COVID, my father got COVID. It was so bad because I didn't believe the virus can kill people. And that time, around the 2020, my father was with the COVID in hospital. In Australia, government can support and can help, but in Iran, no one can support.
Every person I spoke to, including my dad, wants to go back to Iran after the coronavirus has settled.
امیدواریم که هر چه زودتر بتونیم دوباره برگردیم ایران، هم فامیلامون رو ببینیم، خانواده‌مون رو ببینیم.
همه دوست دارم. کی دوست نداره؟ اگه بخوای کلشو بگردی وقت کم میاری. اینقدر جا داره برای دیدن.
There is things that I do want to do. I want to go back. I want to do the things that everyone talks about.
If I have the opportunity, definitely I go back for a visit. Yeah, definitely. It's a good country to visit. It's an ancient country. It's got a lot of sceneries, a lot of heritage. Belong to thousands of years ago.